Good evening and a very warm welcome to India Matters on Tuesday night. We're starting with some big breaking news today. 19 days after the Air India Flight 171 crash, we've got the big breaking story tonight. In just 10 days from now, the first probe details will be officially out. The preliminary report that is supposed to be out within a 1-month time frame from the accident will be out no later than July the 11th. We have a confirmation on that. This preliminary report, remember, will be the first official word on what made that aircraft, that Boeing 787 Dreamliner of Air India, Flight 171, crash on the 12th of July in the afternoon. This report is expected to unlock the mysteries of what went down. Remember, all the theories, all the speculation will hopefully come to an end on the 11th of July or before that, and we'll have a sense of what one of India's worst aviation disasters was caused by. Vishnu Shom, who breaks that story here on NDTV, is with me live. Vishnu, July 11th is when that preliminary report will be out. The crash probe is still very much on, extremely complicated, but within that 1-month time frame, those first details will be out, Vishnu.
It could be a few days before that or after that, but the expectation is by the 11th of July, the report will be out. Now, the details I'm sharing now are details brought to us by our colleague Sesha Sen, and these are important details. And what we know at this juncture is that the preliminary report, which will be out, will be between 4 and 5 pages in length. It will include details of the aircraft, the crew, the aerodrome conditions, the weather conditions, very significantly on the possible causes as well. The name of the investigator will be revealed, and there'll also be a chart which sort of points out the progress which has been made and the areas which need further investigation. I think it's important that to tell our viewers, and there are so many who are watching this, number one, this gives you an indicator of where it's all headed in terms of the investigation. It's not the definitive report. That could take perhaps up to 3 months longer. But this report, it remains to be seen whether we'll get a clear-cut idea or we'll have to wait for that final report.
Okay, we'll have to wait for that final report, but the preliminary report, based on what's on the black box, the flight data recorder, as well as the cockpit voice recorder, will be in that preliminary report. Vishnu and team tracking that closely. We'll have those first details here on NDTV. Thanks very much, Vishnu, for that. The second piece of breaking news today on NDTV, once again, 19 days after the crash of AI171, is that a very big class action lawsuit could be afoot against Air India, against Boeing, against GE, or maybe all of them as well. We can confirm to you here on NDTV that the survivors, the families of victims of the Air India Flight 171 crash, are currently in touch with law firms, the biggest aviation law firms in the world, and at least 57 victims' families in the UK especially are about to decide and finalize a class action lawsuit against either Air India or Boeing or GE or maybe all of the above. Now, what is a class action lawsuit? A class action lawsuit is when many people, many plaintiffs come together and file a joint lawsuit for a common cause in pursuit of either punitive damages or compensation. This happens quite often in aviation crash cases. In fact, I've got some data here of the biggest aviation class action lawsuits of the past. In October 29th, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 had crashed. 189 people had died. The class action suit that was filed was on product liability against Boeing, triggering one of the biggest aviation payouts in history. In fact, it is the biggest. $2.5 billion was actually paid out. On the 10th of March 2019, Ethiopian Airlines 302, this was also a 737 MAX aircraft. 157 people were dead. The case was a class action versus Boeing for the 737 MAX flaws. The payout was over $500 million, and some of those settlements are still taking place. March 8th, 2014, Malaysian Airlines, the famous aircraft that disappeared, MH370, 239 people presumed dead, multiple suits for negligence and emotional trauma was part of the class action suit. At least $50 million have already been paid out. Remember, the official word, of course, is that the search for the aircraft is still very much on. June 1st, 2009, Air France 447, which crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, 228 people died. A class action suit on wrongful death against Airbus and Air France was filed by many of those families. Over $100 million in settlements were paid out by the defendants in that case. So right now, we are talking about the possibility of a large class action suit that is being contemplated. Remember, it's important to point out that the preliminary probe report is not even out just yet. That's going to be out, roughly a week to 10 days from now. But it looks like families are in touch with big law firms to put together what could turn out to be a major lawsuit against either Air India or the maker of the aircraft or the maker of the engines, or maybe all of the above. Let's try and get some sense into what this lawsuit could look like if it happens. Remember, on NDTV, we do not want to prejudge or speculate upon it, but our reporter at NDTV Profit, Ehsan, has reported these details after speaking to experts involved, the families involved as well, and we have a confirmation that among the 53 Britain-based victims' families, many of them are uniting now to possibly begin a class action lawsuit against Air India. Mirza Faizan is a well-known aviation expert based in Texas, aerospace scientist and aviation safety expert. He's trained in air crash investigations as well. Captain Ehsan Khalid is a commercial pilot and civil aviation commentator. He's been a veteran Indian Air Force pilot as well. Let me go to the both of them. Mr. Faizan, I'd like to come to you first. Class action lawsuits are not uncommon, in the history of aviation accidents. We are hearing, and this is not speculation because we've spoken both to families as well as some of the law firms that may be involved, that a class action lawsuit could be contemplated in the case of AI171. What do you make of this, sir?
So, Shiv, first of all, class action lawsuits, as you just said, is not uncommon. Every time there's an air crash investigation, and the investigation, based on the findings, this lawsuit proceeds. And if it is evident that this crash happened because of negligence, and most of the time there's human errors, right? The parties are notified, and as per the law, as per the lawsuit, they are asked to pay to the victims and the families for all the trauma and the loss.
Yeah. Okay. Captain Khalid, a class action lawsuit, not uncommon, as Mirza Faizan has also confirmed. In this particular case, the preliminary crash investigation report could be out in about a week to 10 days from now. In that context, what would the families be speaking to lawyers about?
Look, aviation is a science that is developed over time. Yet, we would learn a lot of things as the science progresses. So if it is just a knowledge gain in which, the humanity didn't know that accidents could happen in this way, then I'm sure it's not a criminal negligence or criminal fault by anyone, be it the software engineer or the manufacturer or the pilot or the technician. However, if it is known at some point of investigation that a thing like this could remotely occur, at the design table, it was discussed and then somebody overruled it. That was the kind of a thing that happened in Boeing 737 MAX and Boeing 737-200 about 2 decades back. That could be something that would be criminal at the part of the manufacturer or the person who took the decision to overrule a possible fatal accident that could happen because of weakness of the architecture of the system. Coming back to that, human error as such if the person does not want to kill himself and others, I don't think it is something which is a criminal negligence. Okay, but human error is failure of human machine to act in a manner that we were told to do, but we were not able to do. It could be engineer or it could be a pilot. So, in my opinion, the preliminary investigation report, the sad thing is that everybody is represented out there. There are two people who are not represented. That is the captain and the co-pilot.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a sad part. The passengers are now being represented by ICAO and a whole battery of lawyers in Britain and here.
Yeah.
He is being represented. Rolls-Royce will be represented. Boeing will be represented. But those two pilots are actually left in open, and there is nobody who's representing them. That is the unfortunate scenario here. Okay. Therefore, probably we would need to look as to why the preliminary investigation report is taking time as much as 30 days. Because if it was, my experience says, if it was a blatant pilot error or blatant an error on the part of the airline, by now Boeing would have been out with microphone everywhere shouting that there's nothing wrong with the Boeing airplane and this was the problem. Whether the AIB comes with a report or doesn't come with a report, that nothing has come out till now. And most importantly, Shiv, I told you in your first interview with on the subject, is that till date, no one knows what was the total cargo on board, what was the total fuel on board.
Yeah.
Right. This doesn't need an...
I'll come to those details in just a bit. Captain Khalid, hold on to that thought for just a moment, because, there are very many different reasons why a class action suit could actually take place. But it's important to once again remind our viewers that the preliminary findings, officially speaking, are not out just yet. So what would this class action suit actually be based on? After reading the pattern of class action suits, we just put together some hypothetical scenarios of what class action suits could look like in the context of flight AI171. Possibility number one could be airline negligence. The families theoretically sue Air India for failure to maintain aircraft safety. Possibility number two would be manufacturer liability. Families theoretically sue Boeing or General Electric, the makers of the engines, for technical failure if that is found to be the cause. Possibility number three, maintenance failure. Families theoretically sue the airline and a third-party MRO firm for flight unworthy aircraft if that is found to be the cause. Possibility number four, sabotage or security lapse. Families hypothetically could sue the airline or airport security providers for failing to prevent malicious action leading to this accident. So there are all these possibilities when it comes to class action suits filed against either the airline or the aircraft maker. Mirza, Faizan, at this point of time, how do these things actually come together in class action suits? Are there big aviation law firms that sort of try and gather all these families together and tell them that they have a case and that they should be, uniting as a class action against these airlines? How does this actually work?
So as Captain Khalid rightly said, all right, of course, there are aviation law firms who work very closely with the victims and the victims' families, and if they're survivor victims, there's one survivor victim as well.
Yeah.
He victim as well. So and when they gather the evidence, in a preliminary investigation report is an important piece of initial evidences. If it is found that the crash has happened because of anyone's deliberate error. I mean, let's say, I will still call it error because no one wanted the plane to crash, but then a deliberate error, as Captain said. So when that happens, they come across and then they work with evidence. This is a scientific team. They work with a scientific team, a technologist, because they have to present to the court beyond suitable doubt that this investigation happened because of negligence and deliberate negligence, right? And when that happens, that's how the lawsuit proceeds. And the final investigation reports also forms a very, very strong evidence for and against this lawsuit.
Captain Khalid, final question. Nothing can bring back loved ones. That loss can never be made up for. But these class action lawsuits led by large, legal firms have resulted in enormous payments. We just saw that information on our screen, $2.5 billion in that Boeing lawsuit for the MAX airliners in Lion Air, 500 million in the Air France 447 crash. There is obviously a great deal of money as well in these cases.
Shiv, let me tell your viewers through you, is that the payouts that you saw in 737 MAX or previous accidents could be a fraction of what could come. It's an existential crisis for Boeing.
Yeah.
Remember, there are 1,100 aircraft which are fully booked for next 100 days. And if there is a technical issue found either with the engine or with the aircraft or with the software, 1,100 aircraft will go down for at least, will go grounded for at least 100 days plus. Every day $1 billion bill will have to be paid by Boeing. So I look at 100 to 200 billion dollar payouts to airlines just for their cancellations. Okay, if the Boeing doesn't pay, then somebody else will pay with the insurance company. So what we are seeing, this class action lawsuit and all, is fragment of what could happen. Similarly, if there was a problem found with the airline, it would be a very tough time for Air India to actually come out of it. But I see bigger problem with the Boeing, with this particular thing, because they are already crippling to recover from the damage that was caused by 737 MAX.
Yeah.
And now this is on top. So this is, all these things puts on the day 11th when you get the preliminary investigation report. And if that has something to say about the electronics, electrical software of Boeing, okay, we are looking at $100 billion loss to someone.
Mirza, Faizan, final question to you. Airlines, aviation companies, aircraft manufacturers, obviously they have a lot of insurance for precisely this kind of thing. Nobody wants an aircraft to crash. But I'm assuming that many of these giant companies would have sort of a financial cushion to face class action lawsuits of this kind for these payouts.
Oh, definitely. Pretty much they are covered by huge insurance backing. So there are, in fact, aviation insurers. So they're covered by insurance backing. And company do not normally keep a cash cushion to deal with this kind of situation. The insurance company, this falls on the insurance company's tab.
Okay, Mirza, Faizan, Captain Ehsan, Khalid, thank you once again for helping us understand this NDTV news break. A legal class action lawsuit in the Air India 171 crash seems to be the way at least a large chunk of the families of victims based in the United Kingdom want to go. And that announcement is likely to be made very soon, probably even this week, ahead of that preliminary probe report emerges. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on India Matters.